The headlines. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi addresses 76th session of United Nations General Assembly in New York, stresses on the need to ensure that Afghanistan soil is not used to spread terrorism. Prime Minister expresses concern over danger of regressive thinking and rising extremism in the world. New Delhi slams Islamabad for misusing UN platforms to spread false and malicious propaganda against India. Quad leaders call for free and open Indo-Pacific, welcome India's decision to resume exports of COVID-19 vaccines. And in IPL cricket, Delhi Capitals beat Rajasthan Royals by 33 runs at Abu Dhabi. Sunrisers Hyderabad take on Punjab Kings at Sharjah. As the nationwide free COVID-19 vaccination campaign at government facilities for those above 18 years is underway, we advise our young listeners to get vaccinated and help others get vaccinated. We also advise our listeners not to lower their guard as COVID-19 remains a threat to our health. Please stay at home unless it is essential to go out and continue to follow these 3 simple steps. Wear a face mask, maintain 2 gaz ki duri for social distancing, and focus on hand and face hygiene. For any COVID-related information and guidance, contact the national helpline numbers 011 2397 8046 and 1075. And now, the news in detail. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi addressed the 76th session of the UN General Assembly on Saturday. It was a message of hope, caution and earnesty. He warned the global community to be aware of the challenges of terrorism. The Prime Minister said that those who use it as a political tool must understand that terrorism is a double-edged sword and can be used to threat for them as well. He expressed concern over the danger of regressive thinking and rising extremism in the world.
आज विश्व के सामने रिग्रेसिव थिंकिंग और एक्सट्रीमिज्म का खतरा बढ़ता जा रहा है। इन परिस्थितियों में पूरे विश्व को साइंस बेस्ड रेशनल और प्रोग्रेसिव थिंकिंग को विकास का आधार बनाना ही होगा।
Mr. Modi said that it must be ensured that the Afghan soil is not used for terror activities. Without naming any country, he told that some nations are trying to use the fragile situation in Afghanistan as a tool which must be stopped.
ये सुनिश्चित किया जाना बहुत जरूरी है कि अफगानिस्तान की धरती का इस्तेमाल आतंकवाद फैलाने और आतंकी हमलों के लिए न हो। हमें इस बात के लिए भी सतर्क रहना होगा कि वहां की नाजुक स्थितियों का कोई देश अपने स्वार्थ के लिए एक टूल की तरह इस्तेमाल करने की कोशिश न करे। इस समय अफगानिस्तान की जनता को, वहां की महिलाओं और बच्चों को, वहां की माइनॉरिटीज को मदद की जरूरत है और इसमें हमें अपना दायित्व निभाना ही होगा।
The Prime Minister said that women, children and minorities need help and we must reach out to them. Pointing at the relevance of the United Nations, the Prime Minister said it needs to improve its effectiveness and enhance reliability. He referred to the fact that questions have been raised about its role in the origin and handling of COVID-19 crisis, climate crisis, proxy wars and the developments in Afghanistan. In this background, he called for global order and to strengthen global laws and the global values. Referring to the maritime security, Mr. Modi stressed the need to have a rule-based order. He said, we can take a leaf out of the UN Security Council resolution passed under the presidency of India. Highlighting India's strides in the COVID care, the Prime Minister said, India not only successfully tackled the challenge, but is now exporting the vaccine to the needy countries.
मैं UNGA को ये जानकारी देना चाहता हूं कि भारत ने दुनिया की पहली DNA वैक्सीन विकसित कर ली है, जिसे 12 साल की आयु से ज्यादा के सभी लोगों को लगाया जा सकता है। एक और mRNA वैक्सीन अपने डेवलपमेंट के आखिरी चरण में है। भारत के वैज्ञानिक कोरोना की एक नेजल वैक्सीन के निर्माण में भी जुटे हैं। मानवता के प्रति अपने दायित्व को समझते हुए भारत ने एक बार फिर दुनिया के जरूरतमंदों को वैक्सीन देनी शुरू कर दी है।
Mr. Modi urged the vaccine manufacturers to come and make vaccines in India.
दुनिया भर के वैक्सीन मैन्युफैक्चरर्स को भी आमंत्रित करता हूं, come, make vaccine in India.
Citing the example of how the government's program reached to the last mile with the use and help of technology, Mr. Modi said that India has clearly shown to the world that democracy can deliver.
When India reforms, the world transforms. भारत में हो रहे साइंस और टेक्नोलॉजी आधारित इनोवेशंस विश्व की बहुत मदद कर सकते हैं. हमारे टेक सॉल्यूशंस का स्केल और उनकी कम लागत दोनों अतुलनीय है. हमारे यूनिफाइड पेमेंट इंटरफेस यूपीआई आज भारत में हर महीने 350 करोड़ से ज्यादा ट्रांजैक्शन हो रहे हैं.
Mr. Modi said that it is the strength of India's democracy that a person of humble origins rises to the ranks as the Prime Minister of the country after starting his journey as a tea seller at a railway station. He mentioned Antyodaya as the integrated equitable development as a theme. The Prime Minister said that the global economy needs diversification and hence we need to expand the global value chain. It requires a democratic and reliable partner which India can provide. However, it is required to have a balance in economy and ecology. He cautioned that the ocean resources should be used and not abused, and we must be wary of the dangers of expansion and exclusion. Mr. Modi announced that India is developing the world's largest green hydrogen hub. Mr. Modi summed up his address with a poem by Gurudev Rabindranath Tagore. Mr. Modi has departed for home, concluding his US trip.
Earlier, the first ever in-person meeting between US President Joe Biden and Prime Minister Narendra Modi was also held in Washington. It was followed by delegation-level talks between the two sides. External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar, National Security Advisor Ajit Doval, Foreign Secretary Harshvardhan Shringla and Indian Ambassador to USA Taranjeet Singh Sandhu participated from the Indian side. In a joint statement issued after the meeting, India and the United States denounced cross-border terrorism. They have asked that the perpetrators of the 26/11 Mumbai terror attack must be brought to justice. The first ever in-person summit of the leaders of the Quad group of countries was held in Washington on Friday. The meeting saw the participation of Prime Minister Narendra Modi, US President Joe Biden, Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison and Japanese Premier Yoshihide Suga. Prime Minister Modi has described the Quad as a force for global good. In a joint statement issued after the summit, the Quad leaders called for a free and open Indo-Pacific, which is also inclusive and resilient. They said the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea must be adhered to in the South China Sea. On Quad Vaccine Initiative, the four nations pledged to donate over 1.2 million doses of COVID vaccines. They welcomed India's decision to resume exports of COVID-19 vaccines from October of this year. To tackle climate change, the four countries called for reducing carbon footprints towards global net zero emissions by 2050 and to establish resilient clean energy supply chains. Talking tough on terrorism, Quad leaders said Afghan soil must not be used to threaten or attack any country or to shelter or train or fund the terrorists. They asked the Taliban to stick to their commitments on human rights.
Foreign Secretary Harshvardhan Shringla said that the Prime Minister's visit to the United States has been a comprehensive and useful visit, which allowed for high-level interactions. He was addressing media persons in New York after the Prime Minister's address to the UN General Assembly. In today's Hotspot section, we bring you his comments on Prime Minister's visit to USA, a new chapter in India-US and India-Quad ties.
Namaskar. As you are aware, Prime Minister addressed the high-level segment of the 76th United Nations General Assembly. This is on the theme of the General Assembly's debate, which is building resilience through hope to recovery from COVID-19, rebuild sustainably, respond to the needs of the planet, respect the rights of people, and revitalize the United Nations. Prior to his address, the Prime Minister was greeted by the President of the General Assembly, Mr. Abdullah Shahid. You would recall that the President of the General Assembly visited India on the 24th of July, and he had at that time called on the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister, when he met the President of the General Assembly after he assumed office, he has just assumed office recently, congratulated him on his presidency of hope. The message of the Prime Minister was very well received, his congratulatory message, and I am told that there was very positive resonance on this concept of the presidency of hope. You are aware that the Prime Minister's address to the General Assembly marks the culmination of a very successful, a very comprehensive tour of the United States. The Prime Minister was in Washington, D.C., where he held a bilateral meeting with the U.S. President, President Joe Biden. He also met Vice President Kamala Harris. He participated in the meeting of the Quad Leaders Summit, which was attended by the Prime Ministers of Japan and Australia, hosted by the President of the United States. And he also separately had meetings with his counterparts from Japan and Australia. In Washington, he met a number of CEOs of major US corporates. So all in all, it has been a short but very, very comprehensive, very useful and visit which allowed for extensive high-level interactions. His address in the United Nations, which you would have heard, has focused on some important themes. The first theme, of course, was that democracies can deliver, democracies have delivered. The Prime Minister spoke about an array of flagship programs and initiatives in India that have delivered very successfully to hundreds of millions of our citizens, whether it is in the aspect of enabling them to enter into the banking sector by allowing people to open bank accounts, whether it is in terms of participating in health schemes that provide for quality health services to a very large number of our people, health insurance, low-cost housing for millions of our citizens, being converted from landless to landowners, as the Prime Minister said. Also, very strong emphasis that the Prime Minister laid on this issue of technology. Technology has delivered for us. We have used technology in very many areas of our developmental activity that has enabled us to reach out to people in all parts of the country, every segment of society. And that, I think, has been a very important message that has been conveyed. He also drew the analogy of our efforts in the health sector. Health is an overriding priority, obviously, in the general discourse in the United Nations at this point of time. The Prime Minister spoke about our use of technology in the health sector, especially with regard to the ability to immunize hundreds of millions of our citizens in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic through the CoWIN platform, which is one of the finest, most, I would say, well-conceived digital platforms. You would recall that when CoWIN was introduced to the international community through the CoWIN Global Conclave, 142 countries participated. It has been put as an open source digital platform available to countries around the world. The Prime Minister also spoke about the success of our vaccination program. 800 million plus of our citizens have already received vaccination doses. We are looking at accelerating this, and the Prime Minister emphasized the fact that the success of this entire enterprise was also based on the organizational aspect of it, including CoWIN, of course. And of course, the fact that we have today come out with cutting-edge technologies. We have our indigenous vaccines. We also have developed a DNA vaccine which will be introduced for children, which is a touch vaccine. We have come up with mRNA technology. So we are also at the cutting edge of vaccine development. Prime Minister referred to India as a manufacturing hub for vaccines for the entire world. In that context, of course, he spoke of the fact that we had announced our decision to again recommence exports of vaccines from the month of October. Again, this is extremely well received in the UN and the international community. The Prime Minister spoke of global value chains in the context of Atmanirbhar Bharat, resilient supply chains that we are developing. Important emphasis was given on climate change, in which the Prime Minister pointed out that we ourselves had unilaterally gone in for a 450 gigawatt target by 2030. We were ahead in terms of meeting our expectations in the Paris Agreement, and that if we were to look at the gains that we would make in addressing the issue of climate change, it is because we have to answer the future generations. And the Prime Minister pointed out that it was important for us to ensure that we do the right thing now, so that our future generations don't question the fact that we hadn't done enough to make our planet both sustainable environmentally and something that is enduring. I think, again, when you talk about technology, the Prime Minister talked about science-based rational thinking applied to development. I think that is an important factor that science and technology have dictated how we can best provide development gains to as many people as possible, as effectively and as cost effectively as possible also. And he also talked about, from that point of view, the development of incubators, the startup culture, the importance and promise of innovation among the youth of India, the development of 75 satellites to commemorate our 75th anniversary of independence. So, on international issues, you would have noticed that the Prime Minister referred to the most pressing issue of today again, which is the topic of conversation of almost every head of state and government that has spoken at the United Nations, the situation in Afghanistan. He said that countries using terrorism as a tool should note that this is a double-edged sword. I think that's a very important point to make, that you cannot think of encouragement to terrorism because that can come back to bite you. In the context of Afghanistan, the Prime Minister referred to the fact that the plight of women, children, minorities should not be forgotten, that these basic human rights of people of Afghanistan are important. They need the help of the international community, and it was incumbent on the international community to come forward to speak in one voice on some of these issues that are important to all of us. The Prime Minister did speak about the fact that we shouldn't abuse our natural resources. This is a legacy for the future. This is a trusteeship of nature that has been bestowed on us, that our culture does. Indian culture and ethos is one that is close to nature, that we live in harmony with nature, and that is something that's important in today's context of dealing with climate change, dealing with some of the environmental issues that we face globally. And he also spoke about the UN Security Council, in particular our contribution to the issue of maritime security in the UN Security Council. As you know, we held the presidency of the Security Council, a very successful presidency. Our permanent representative has to take great amount of that credit for a presidency that outlined and shaped thinking in many new areas. The highlight of which was the Prime Minister's chairing the open debate of the Security Council on the issue of maritime security. This is the first time an Indian Prime Minister has chaired a meeting of the UN Security Council. This is also the first time India has, or any country for that matter, has successfully steered a UN Security Council debate on the issue of maritime security and come up with an outcome document which today is being referred to by many countries as being the guiding, I would say, principles on this issue. We also, of course, focused on the issue of technology and peacekeeping, the important issue of counterterrorism, and in that context, of course, when we talk about international issues that are important to the global community, the Prime Minister referred to the COVID-19 and its origins, the ease of doing business. I think that's important when we talk about the need for greater investment and technology flows, the issue of good governance. He called upon the UN to provide a global order, global law and global values. I think if you look at the statement, one or two things become apparent. The first, of course, is that India, by its own developmental paradigm and the success of its developmental efforts, is really in many senses providing development to the entire world, because we represent 1/6 of humanity. Our development, our progress, our success is the world's success. The second, of course, is the intention to share with the international community our best practices, our experiences, and in that context, the Prime Minister referred to the global common good and the fact that India has always looked to seeing how we could both support and assist the larger global community in whatever we do. And in that context, of course, technology and other issues were important in terms of focus. And of course, when we talk about development, then we talk about several models of development. I did give you some examples in terms of COVID, in terms of vaccine development that can also be successfully shared with the rest of the world. And that, I think, was the larger theme of what we spoke about. Of course, the PM's address helped us to project our long-standing growing credentials as a South-South development partner in the context of the India-UN Development Partnership Fund. Here again, I think important steps have been taken to see how we can work with the UN in an outreach that would enable some of our developmental successes and models that we have evolved within our country to be shared as effective and cost-effective practices that can be adopted elsewhere in the world. Financing for development, our commitment to the idea of global partnership under SDG 17, including on climate change. And of course, a number of countries in their addresses have referred to India, in particular development partners in the context of COVID-19 assistance, in the context of development programs, and we thank them, we appreciate their sentiment, and we continue to look forward to a very close partnership with countries all over the world in the furthering the extension of what we are doing within our own country.
New Delhi has slammed Islamabad for misusing platforms provided by the United Nations to propagate false and malicious propaganda against India. In its right to reply in response to the reference made by Pakistan Prime Minister Imran Khan, India's first secretary at the United Nations, Sneha Dubey, said Islamabad has an established history of aiding and abetting terrorists.
We exercise our right of reply to one more attempt by the leader of Pakistan to tarnish the image of this august forum by bringing in matters internal to my country and going so far as to spew falsehoods on the world stage. While such statements deserve our collective contempt and sympathy for the mindset of the person who utters falsehood repeatedly, I am taking the floor to set the record straight. Regrettably, this is not the first time the leader of Pakistan has misused platforms provided by the UN to propagate false and malicious propaganda against my country, and seeking in vain to divert the world's attention from the sad state of his country where terrorists enjoy free pass while the lives of ordinary people, especially those belonging to the minority communities, are turned upside down.
The Indian representative at the United Nations stated that Jammu, Kashmir and Ladakh were, are and will always be an integral and inalienable part of India, and Pakistan must vacate all areas under its illegal occupation.
India's Defence Minister Rajnath Singh has called for proactive synergy among the armed forces in future military strategies and responses to safeguard the interests of the nation. He was addressing the graduates of the 59th National Defence College during their convocation ceremony in New Delhi on Saturday. Mr. Singh said the bold approach of the government on issues like border disputes and cross-border terrorism has made India stronger in the recent past, and it has now assumed a greater global role and responsibility.
In the last decade, India has grown stronger in every way and has assumed a greater global role and responsibility. While it is totally committed to peace and goodwill amongst all nations, it has shown its steely resolve that threats to its internal and external security will no longer be tolerated. Our actions in Balakot and Galwan are clear signals to the aggressors that by attempt to threaten our sovereignty will be given a swift and befitting response.
Sharing his views on the situation in Afghanistan, Mr. Singh said the developments have highlighted the reality of our times. The minister emphasized on the need to draw lessons from the situation in Afghanistan far beyond the immediate reverberations being felt in the region and beyond. This is All India Radio giving you the world news. For quick news updates round the clock, follow us on Twitter at AIR News Alerts.
India has crossed yet another milestone in the COVID vaccination drive, with total vaccination crossing the 85 crore mark today. The Union Health Ministry has termed it as yet another achievement in its fight against COVID-19. Health Minister Mansukh Mandavia has said that the world's largest vaccination drive is creating new benchmarks. To commemorate 6 lakh Americans who lost their lives to COVID-19, a unique art exhibition has been arranged at the National Mall in Washington, D.C. and is drawing the attention of visitors. Conceptualized by artist Suzanne Brennan Fritzenberg, the memorial exhibition displays hundreds and thousands of simple white flags with personalized messages by those who lost their loved ones to COVID-19. The exhibition, titled In America Remember, has over 600,000 plastic flags spread over 20 acres of land and narrate heart-rending tales of woe and tragedy that has struck the world in the form of the pandemic.
World Pharmacist Day is being celebrated today. The day aims to recognize the role of pharmacists in the field of health sector. International Pharmaceutical Federation first observed the World Pharmacist Day in 1912. The theme of the day for this year is Pharmacy, Always Trusted for Your Health. The theme has been drawn to draw special attention to the trust in the health sector and the practice of pharmacy. Prime Minister Narendra Modi will bring home 157 artifacts and antiquities from the US. These were handed over by the United States during his visit. Mr. Modi and President Biden committed to strengthen their efforts to combat the theft, illicit trade, and trafficking of cultural objects. The list of 157 artifacts includes a diverse set to items ranging from the 1.5 meter bas relief panel of Rivanta in sandstone of the 10th CE. Also, there is an 8.5 centimeter tall exquisite bronze Nataraj from the 12th CE. Prime Minister Narendra Modi will share his thoughts with the people of the country and abroad in the Mann Ki Baat program on All India Radio tomorrow at 11 a.m. It will be the 81st episode of the monthly radio program. Now let us take a look at the major developments around the world as reported in the foreign press. Wall Street Journal reports Islamic State attacks in eastern Afghanistan challenge Taliban rule. The Guardian says China frees detained Canadian Michael Kovrig and Michael Spavor. The Washington Post writes Biden defends his social agenda bill, saying the cost will be zero. Gulf Times reports Qatar and Madagascar establish diplomatic relations, and Financial Times says Olaf Scholz leads by a whisker in last hours before German election.
The Bangladesh Bangabandhu Bapu digital exhibition was opened for public viewing in Dhaka on Saturday. Education Minister of Bangladesh Dr. Dipu Moni, State Minister for Culture K.M. Khalid, and High Commissioner of India to Bangladesh Vikram Duraiswamy opened the exhibition at the Shilpakala Academy in Dhaka. The exhibition showcases in a thematic manner the lives of the father of the nation of Bangladesh, Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, and father of the nation Mahatma Gandhi. The exhibition has been specially curated by the two governments to commemorate the Mujib Borsho birth centenary of Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujib and 150 years of the birth of Mahatma Gandhi, as well as the golden jubilee of India-Bangladesh bilateral relations. A quick look at the headlines once again. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi addresses the 76th session of United Nations General Assembly in New York, stresses on the need to ensure that Afghanistan soil is not used to spread terrorism. Prime Minister expresses concern over danger of regressive thinking and rising extremism in the world. New Delhi slams Islamabad for misusing UN platforms to spread false and malicious propaganda against India. Quad leaders call for free and open Indo-Pacific. Welcome India's decision to resume exports of COVID-19 vaccines. And in IPL cricket, Delhi Capitals beat Rajasthan Royals by 33 runs at Abu Dhabi. Sunrisers Hyderabad take on Punjab Kings at Sharjah. India is celebrating the 151st birth anniversary of Mahatma Gandhi. Before we end, let us listen to his favorite bhajan, Vaishnav Jan, by artists from Brazil.
Vaishnava Jana to tene kaije pidi parai janire pare duke upakare kare toye manabi mananire Vaishnava Jana to tene kaije pidi parai janire sakele lokma chonbande ninana kare kenire Vaskashmane Nichelaki Dane Dane Jane Nintenire Vaishnava Janato Tenekaije Pidi Parai Janire
And with that, we end this bulletin. We'll be back at the same time tomorrow with the next edition of World News.